What if you knew with absolute certainty which side you were on in an invisible cosmic war? Not a conflict of nations or politics, but an eternal struggle between absolute good and absolute evil, where every choice, every thought, aligned you with the forces of light or the legions of darkness. You find yourself standing in the Judean wilderness, under a sky so vast it feels primordial. The sun is a hammer of white-hot light, and the shadows it casts off the limestone cliffs are as sharp and black as shards of obsidian. This is a land of extremes, a world with no room for gentle shades of gray. To survive here, not just physically but spiritually, you must choose a side. And let's be honest, given their strict diet and the complete absence of Wi-Fi, you probably wouldn't survive this. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin tonight's journey together. For the small, isolated community that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, this brutal landscape was a mirror of their theology. They saw all of creation, from the highest angel to the smallest man, divided into two opposing camps. This is the core of their identity as the children of light. They believed that at the beginning of time, God created two spirits to govern humanity. The first was the Prince of Light, who presided over the righteous, the truthful, and the pure. Those who followed him were the children of light. The second was the angel of darkness, a being they often called by the sinister name of Belial. He ruled over the wicked, the deceitful, and the corrupt, and his followers were the children of darkness. This stark black and white worldview, known as dualism, wasn't entirely new in the ancient world. A mainstream historical fact is that Judaism had for centuries been in contact with the Persian religion of Zoroastrianism, which famously depicted a grand cosmic struggle between a god of light and a spirit of darkness. But the community at Qumran took this concept and forged it into something uniquely intense and personal. They believed they and they alone were the children of light. Everyone else, the occupying Romans, their neighboring kingdoms, and even the priests at the great temple in Jerusalem, were walking, knowingly or not, in the dominion of darkness. But to navigate a world so fraught with spiritual danger, a world where one misstep could lead you into the shadows, you need a guide. You need someone with a map. For this community, that guide was a towering and mysterious figure they called the Morhati Zedek, the teacher of righteousness. He is the ghost in this desert machine. The scrolls speak of him with a reverence that borders on worship, yet they never once mention his actual name. He is known only by his title and by the titanic struggle that defined his life. The teacher, they believed, was a priest from a righteous lineage who had been given a divine gift. God had revealed to him, and him alone, the true meaning of the ancient prophecies. All the words of Isaiah, Habakkuk, and the other seers were not just stories about the past. They were coded messages about the present, about the final generation. And the teacher was the only one with the key to the cipher. But a hero needs a villain, and the teacher's nemesis was an equally mysterious figure the scrolls call the wicked priest. This is where theology explodes into history, and scholars fiercely debate the historical identity of both the teacher and his rival. The leading theory places their conflict in the turbulent 2nd century BCE. The wicked priest is thought to be one of the Hasmonean rulers of Jerusalem, who had controversially seized the office of both king and high priest. In this view, the teacher of righteousness was the leader of the true, legitimate priesthood, who, after being persecuted by this usurper, led his followers into the desert to create a pure and undefiled society. He took the abstract idea of a world of light and dark and gave it names, faces, and a specific, urgent historical context. He was the one who told his followers, "The war is not a distant myth. It is here. It is now. And you are its chosen soldiers." You now understand the premise of this cosmic war, with the teacher of righteousness as your general and the wicked priest as your sworn enemy. The first command issued in this war is perhaps the most shocking. You are to abandon the holy city. You are to turn your back on the great temple of Jerusalem, the one place on earth where God himself is said to dwell. This wasn't just a strategic retreat. It was an act of profound spiritual rebellion, an unthinkable choice for any Jew of this period. To understand the children of light, you must first understand what they were willing to reject. The Jerusalem temple was the undisputed center of the Jewish world. This is a core historical fact. It was a place of staggering beauty, a destination for pilgrims from across the known world, and most importantly, the only legitimate place to offer the sacrifices necessary for forgiveness and atonement. To willingly exile yourself from the temple was to cut yourself off from the very heart of your faith. So why would they do it? Their reasoning was twofold, aimed at what they saw as a deep and festering corruption in both the temple's leadership and its very operations. First, there was the problem of the priesthood. As we heard, they believed the office of high priest had been usurped by the wicked priest, a figure representing the Hasmonean dynasty. These rulers had taken the high priesthood by political and military force, shattering the sacred lineage of Zadok, the priest appointed by King Solomon centuries earlier. For the teacher and his followers, this was the original sin. Every ritual performed in the temple, every sacrifice offered, was therefore invalid, performed by illegitimate hands. The holiest place on earth was being run by counterfeit priests, and to participate in their worship was to endorse their corruption. But their rejection went even deeper, into the very fabric of time itself. This is a fascinating and quirky tidbit that was central to their schism. They believed the temple was using the wrong calendar. The Jerusalem priesthood followed a lunisolar calendar, based on the phases of the moon and periodically adjusted to keep it aligned with the seasons. The children of light, however, believed in a different, divinely revealed calendar, one described in ancient, non-biblical books like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees. This was a perfect solar calendar of 364 days. It was mathematically pristine, with each festival falling on the same day of the week every single year. This wasn't a minor disagreement. It was a catastrophe. Because the two calendars were out of sync, it meant that the temple was celebrating the most sacred holy days, Passover, the Feast of Weeks, and especially the Day of Atonement, on the wrong days. In the eyes of the Qumran community, this invalidated the entire temple service. It was a sanctuary out of tune with the heavens, a clock telling the wrong time. This is why the teacher led his followers out into the desert. They had to leave, not just to escape persecution, but to worship God at the proper, divinely appointed times. This radical act of separation raises a question that historians still debate. Did the community see their exile as a temporary protest, a holding pattern until the temple in Jerusalem could be cleansed and the rightful priests restored? Or did they arrive at a far more revolutionary conclusion, that they no longer needed the stone temple at all? The evidence in their scrolls suggests the latter. They came to believe that their own community, with its perfect adherence to the law and its righteous leader, had become a new and better sanctuary, a temple of men. This is a breathtakingly bold idea. They believed that in the absence of a pure physical temple, God had sanctioned a spiritual one. Their life in the desert was not a sad exile, it was a sacred service. Their prayers took the place of the temple incense. Their sacred communal meals took the place of the sacrificial feasts. And most importantly, their collective life of absolute purity and holiness was the ultimate sacrifice, the true atonement for the sins of the land. They had not just left the temple, they had become its replacement. This belief is what gave them the strength to survive in the wilderness, convinced that they, not the priests in Jerusalem, were now the true center of God's cosmos. They were a living, breathing temple, built of righteous souls in the heart of the desert. You are now a part of this living temple, this community that has become the new dwelling place for God on earth. But a temple, especially one built of flawed human beings, must be kept spotlessly clean. And so, the central daily practice of your life becomes a relentless war against impurity. This is not about hygiene, it is about holiness. For the children of light, ritual impurity was a tangible stain from the world of darkness. To be pure was to be spiritually fortified, and every member of the community was expected to be a vigilant guardian of that sacred cleanliness. The most powerful physical evidence of this obsession is etched into the landscape of their settlement at Qumran. A key historical fact is the discovery of more than 10 mikvot, or stepped ritual baths, at the site. Considering that water in this arid wilderness is more precious than gold, the complex engineering they used to create aqueducts and channel every drop of rain into these pools is astounding. It shows their absolute priority. You can almost picture the daily ritual. A man, covered in the dust of his work, walks to the edge of a stone-cut pool. He descends the steps, reciting a prayer, and plunges his body into the cool water. For a moment, the world of toil and heat vanishes. He emerges, cleansed not just of dust, but of any spiritual contamination he might have brushed against. He is renewed, reborn into his status as a son of light, ready to join the holy assembly. But purity of the body was only the beginning. It had to be matched by a perfect discipline of action. This is where we turn from the archaeological ruins to another incredible artifact, the scroll known as 1QS, or the Serek Hayahad, which translates as the Manual of Discipline. This scroll was their constitution, their bylaws, and their military code all rolled into one. It laid out, in painstaking detail, how every member of the community was expected to conduct themselves, and the precise punishments for every imaginable failure. And the level of detail is where things get truly quirky. The Manual of Discipline gives us an intimate and frankly terrifying glimpse into their daily lives. Imagine being in their General Assembly, a solemn meeting for prayer or study. Every move you make is being judged. According to the penal code laid out in the scroll, if you were to interrupt another member while he was speaking, you would earn 10 days of penance. If you fell asleep during the meeting, perhaps after a long day of copying scrolls, that would be 30 days. And for the offense of what the scroll calls guffawing foolishly, a loud and inappropriate laugh, you would also receive 30 days of penance, which typically involved reduced food rations and exclusion from the pure communal meal. Even spitting was a punishable offense. This incredibly strict system of rules has led to a major scholarly debate. Historians still debate whether this manual of discipline was an idealized constitution they aspired to, or a practical, day-to-day legal code that was enforced to the letter. Was this community really a place with no laughter, where every word was weighed? Or was this a utopian blueprint, a vision of the perfect society that the leaders held up as a goal, even if the reality was a bit more human and messy? While we can't know for sure, the sheer specificity of the rules suggests they were, at the very least, the standard by which everyone was judged. This constant vigilance was the practical application of their dualistic worldview. Every rule was a conscious choice for order over chaos, for light over darkness, to hold your tongue, to share your property honestly, to stay awake during the sacred assembly. These were not just social graces. They were battlefield maneuvers in the cosmic war. Breaking a rule was not just a personal failing. It was allowing a tiny fissure in the walls of the holy temple, a small victory for the forces of Belial. And so, this life of perfect purity was a constant, unending effort. It was a combination of daily ritual immersions to purify the body and a rigid set of rules to discipline the spirit. This was the training regimen for God's elite soldiers. It was designed to forge them into a single, unified, and utterly obedient force. They believed the final battle was imminent, and when that day came, every single soldier in the army of light had to be flawless. You are now a flawless soldier in God's holy army. Your body is purified by daily immersions, and your spirit is disciplined by a rulebook that governs your every waking moment. You are part of a perfect, unified force, waiting patiently in the desert for the final battle to commence. But an army, no matter how disciplined, needs intelligence. It needs to know the battle plan. It needs to understand the timing of the conflict and the nature of the enemy. For this, the children of light turn to their most sacred possession, the scrolls of the ancient prophets. But there was a problem. When you unroll the scroll of the prophet Habakkuk, he speaks of the Chaldeans, the ancient Babylonians. When you read Isaiah, he warns of the Assyrians. These were empires of the past, long turned to dust. How could these ancient conflicts serve as a guide for your imminent cosmic war? The community's answer to this question was a revolutionary belief, a secret they guarded as their most precious treasure. They believed the teacher of righteousness had been given the key to unlock the true, hidden meaning of the prophet's words. This unique method of interpretation is a core historical fact about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's known by the Hebrew word pesher, which means solution or interpretation. In the caves around Qumran, archaeologists found several of these pesharim, which are essentially running commentaries on the prophetic books. Their structure is simple and electric. The commentator quotes a verse from the Bible and then follows it with a statement like, "The interpretation of this matter concerns," before revealing its true meaning for their own time. They believed the prophets were writing in code, and only their community had the cipher. The secret, they taught, was that the prophets themselves didn't fully understand their own prophecies. They were simply channels for God's word, writing down messages intended for the final generation, which, of course, was them. Every ancient event was a symbol, every name was a code. The sinners of Ephraim might mean one group of their rivals, the man of the lie another. The entire prophetic library was not a history of the past, but a detailed script for the end of the world, and the teacher of righteousness was the only one who could read it. To see how this worked in practice is to get a thrilling glimpse into their minds. Here is a quirky and specific tidbit from their commentary on Habakkuk. The ancient prophet describes a fierce and impetuous nation, the Chaldeans, who sweep across the earth. The Qumran commentator quotes this and then decodes it for his readers. He confidently states that the passage refers to the Kittim. Scholars are all but certain that Kittim was their code name for the new terrifying empire on the scene, the Romans. The text then explains how the Roman legions, with their speed, their discipline, and their practice of sacrificing to their military standards, were a perfect match for the ancient prophecy. For them, reading the morning news and reading the book of Habakkuk were the same thing. This, naturally, leads to a scholarly debate about the source of this incredible interpretive confidence. Scholars debate just how this interpretive key was believed to function. Was the ability to decode prophecy a one-time, charismatic gift from God to the teacher of righteousness alone? Or did the teacher figure out a systematic method, a set of rules that he could then teach to his disciples, allowing them to continue decoding current events as they happen? The answer seems to be a bit of both. A foundational revelation to their unique leader, which then became the basis for an entire school of thought within the community. You can only imagine the psychological power of this worldview. The world is no longer chaotic or frightening. Every political development, every rumor of war, becomes a confirmation of what you already know to be true. It's all part of God's script. This belief system removes all doubt. It gives you an unshakable sense of purpose and destiny, assuring you that your small community in the desert is, in fact, the central focus of God's entire plan for history. You are no longer just waiting. You are watching the final act of a divine drama unfold, and you have the libretto in your hands. You are now fully embedded in this desert sanctuary. A flawless soldier, armed with the secret knowledge of the prophets, living a life of perfect discipline, waiting for the final war. You hold the script for the end of the world in your hands, and you watch the horizon for the signs. You see the legions of the Kittim, the Romans, on the move, and you feel no fear, only vindication. Their arrival is not a surprise. It is a prophecy being fulfilled. You believe you know exactly what happens next. A 40-year war, the intervention of angels, and a final, glorious victory for the children of light. But the apocalypse that arrived was not the one they had read about in their scrolls. This is the final, tragic historical fact of their story. In or around the year 68 CE, during the chaos of the First Jewish-Roman War, the real Kittim arrived at their doorstep. The soldiers of Rome's 10th Legion were not playing a role in a divine drama. They were crushing a provincial rebellion with brutal efficiency. The archaeological evidence at Qumran tells the story. A thick layer of ash, Roman arrowheads, a sudden, violent end. In their final moments, it seems the members of the community frantically gathered their most precious possession, their library of hundreds of sacred scrolls, and hid them in the darkness of the nearby caves, a last, desperate act of faith. Then their community, their living temple, was destroyed. The children of light vanished into the silence of the desert. For nearly 2,000 years, their story was lost. They were a ghost, a whisper, a forgotten sect. But their ideas, their very souls, lay sleeping in clay jars. When their library was stumbled upon by a Bedouin shepherd in 1947, it was like a message in a bottle finally washing ashore. The scrolls opened a window into a world of belief that had been completely unknown, and they have since transformed our understanding of the era that gave birth to both Christianity and modern Judaism. The most stunning part of this rediscovery is the series of uncanny echoes between the scrolls and the writings of the New Testament. This is a fascinating tidbit that continues to fuel discussion. The scrolls are filled with concepts like a great teacher of righteousness who is persecuted by a wicked priest. They speak of a new covenant and of a sacred meal of bread and wine that anticipates a messianic banquet. The Gospel of John, in particular, is filled with the same stark dualism of light versus darkness that is the hallmark of Qumran theology. This has naturally led to the most enduring and passionate scholarly debate surrounding the Dead Sea Scrolls. What exactly was the relationship between this community and the early followers of Jesus? Was John the Baptist, the ascetic who baptized in the Jordan River just miles from Qumran, a former member? Are the parallels a sign of direct influence, or were these ideas simply in the air throughout Judea at the time? Most scholars today believe the latter, that they were not the same group, but two different responses to the same turbulent times, drawing from a shared well of concepts and language. The scrolls are not a secret history of Christianity, but they are an invaluable family photo album of the world it grew up in. The legacy of the Children of Light is therefore a profound paradox. In their own time, their vision for the future of Judaism was a path not taken. After the temple was destroyed in 70 CE, it was Rabbinic Judaism, with its focus on law, interpretation, and community life adaptable to any land, that endured, largely leaving behind the imminent, fiery apocalypticism of the desert sect. In this sense, the Children of Light failed. Their prophecy did not come to pass, and their community was wiped from the earth. But in another sense, they achieved a kind of immortality they could never have imagined. Their words, hidden away in hope of a righteous future generation, have found one in us. They have given us the clearest picture we have of the intense, fervent, and diverse world of belief that existed just before a turning point in human history. They are a stark reminder of the power of an idea, and of how far a community is willing to go to create a small island of pure light in what they see as an ocean of darkness. Their waiting ended in fire, but their echo was preserved in the silence of the caves, waiting for us to listen. Now, as our journey concludes, allow the intensity of their world to soften and fade. The image of the stark desert cliffs dissolves into the gentle landscape of your own quiet room. The weight of their cosmic war, their strict rules, and their secret prophecies can be laid down. The silence of the caves is no longer a place of anxious waiting, but a place of deep, ancient peace. Let the feeling of the dry desert air be replaced by the soft comfort of your own bed, and the brilliant, unforgiving sun be replaced by a gentle, soothing darkness. There are no more riddles to solve, no more sides to choose. The story is told, and all that remains is the quiet rhythm of your own breathing, a steady and calming presence. Allow that simple rhythm to guide you away from the distant past and into the peaceful, immediate present, easing you gently toward a deep and restorative sleep.